Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Wednesday, May 22nd, 2024. Though we are taping it on Tuesday night, May 21st. I got all confused yesterday, as you may have heard if you were listening yesterday. So just give me a break. It's late. It's 10 o'clock. I just been on a plane. We're all confused. We're going to try to have fun here. No, unfortunately, unlike other commentary after darks, no one's drinking. So we're not in that kind of mood. And by we, I mean executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
And Washington commentary columnist Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
Well, the defense rested, the prosecution rested, the active part of the arguments in front of the jury are over. In the Alvin Bragg hush money misdemeanors risen to the level of felonies because of a second crime that has not been actually enumerated to the jury, which may happen next week when the judge issues his instructions to the jury. There were discussions after the jury was sent home about what those instructions would be. I guess that's going to continue. Clearly, Judge Mershon wants to do whatever he can. I mean, I think it's fair to say, as an objective observer, that Judge Mershon is doing whatever he can to try to get a guilty verdict in the case for Alvin Bragg, and that effort was complicated over the last 3 or 4 days by the horrendous testimony of Michael Cohen, and then some dispute about whether or not the testimony of his lawyer, Mr. Costello, helped the prosecution or helped the defense. I think you really have to be deep in the weeds to think that it particularly helped the prosecution, but it may not have helped the defense. And people are really deep in the weeds. So every conversation, everything you're reading about this, everything we see about this is really filtered through the question of whether your prior is that Trump should be convicted of any crime that he is accused of, because we must be saved from him. He needs a felony conviction so that America can be saved from him, no matter what the case is. And this is the only one that's going to happen before November. Matt.
Well, it's worth questioning that assumption, because heading into the trial, the assumption was that these legal cases would spell Trump's demise in a general election. And yet, as the trial in New York has unfolded, Trump has, if anything, gained a little bit, especially in the swing states against Biden. The trial has not hurt Trump. It's not dented him any more than he has been dented over the past 8 years, 9 years in American life. Indeed, Biden is the one who has suffered as the trial has progressed, as his short-lived bump from the State of the Union in some of the states has faded away. And now we have a Reuters poll out today with Biden at one of his lowest approval ratings ever. So
I think it is his lowest approval rating ever at
in 36. The Reuters poll,
36%.
And so why do we think that a conviction, if one does occur, would hurt Trump? I think that assumption is just as flawed as the assumption that the lawfare was going to end him. If anything, it helped him win the Republican nomination, and it hasn't hurt him in the general election. So I don't see a conviction making much difference.
I think the last 8 years should have told us that the American people are capable of having two opposing thoughts in their head, or enough of them. One of which is that they disapprove of Trump and his conduct, and the other is that given the choice before them, they'll vote for him, as opposed to voting for his rival. Now, enough of them did that in 2016 to make him win, and not enough of them did that in 2020 to make him win, and 2024 is an open question, but he has never had a positive. The American people have not viewed him positively, ever. They do not view him positively. They also don't view Joe Biden positively. Maybe we're living in an age in which no one will ever view a politician who serves in the party that you're not a part of or that you're not aligned with will ever say anything positive, although we do have all these interesting new state numbers I mean, the thing the one that is of most interest to me are the sky high approval ratings in the very swingy state of Pennsylvania of both the Democratic governor, Josh Shapiro, and the Democratic Senator, John Fetterman. And that means that Republicans like both of them because they're both around 60% approval. And that's sort of not supposed to be happening that much. So it can happen. The fact that it's not happening at the national level is a story in and of itself. Like, that is, the American people have good taste. Just to say that Shapiro and Fetterman are impressive politicians in their own way. Biden and Trump are have unbelievable publicly exposed character flaws, and they don't like either one of them unless you're really deep in the base.
It's interesting. You're right. I mean, Trump, of course, won in 2016 and lost in 2020. Yet, unlike many incumbents, he actually gained vote share between 2016 and 2020 and lost. I mean, if you look at the last president who was reelected, Obama, he fit the recent precedent, or he was the most recent president, and he lost votes in between.
He lost 5 million votes, and
exactly.
Trump gained about 9 million,
right,
or 10 million.
And it doesn't look like Biden's in a position to gain votes, does it? Right now, as we speak here on May 21st, 2024, and so that in itself is unusual and worth pointing out. And what you're saying about Shapiro and Fetterman is also interesting. I've been thinking recently how, in some ways, this election is similar to 1972 with Trump as Nixon. So Nixon won a big election in 1972 against George McGovern, but he had no coattails. Republicans actually lost seats. Right. Yeah. And yet Nixon had this tremendous personal victory. And I wonder whether something might not happen like that again, where Trump wins. And, if you just look at the battlegrounds now, Biden was in New Hampshire. Why is he going to New Hampshire? That should be a blue state. Biden opened up a campaign office in Virginia. They're beginning to get worried about Virginia, of all places. There's Trump in Minnesota over the past weekend. Trump is expanding.
Down by 2. Trump down by 2 in Minnesota in the latest poll.
So we're here in the spring of the election, and Trump is expanding the map. Biden is
while he's in court.
While he's in court.
In court for 6 weeks.
But no other Republican, in particular at the Senate level, seems to be doing that well. Some of them may be closing the gap a little bit, but it's very localized Trump.
We have this very stunning result in Arizona where we have Trump up by 5, which is a state that he lost, obviously, and lost controversially because people don't like the evidence of their own eyes and don't like to believe the truth. But he lost there by, I don't know, 10 or 12,000 votes. So right now in the polling, he's up 5, but Carrie Lake, the Trump-like candidate for Senate against Ruben Gallego, in the seat that Kristen Sinema has basically jumped out of because she couldn't win it. Lake's down 13. Trump's up 5. Lake's down 13. So that is the opposite of coattails. And that in itself is an interesting result because Arizonans really know Carrie Lake. They know her really, really, really well, and this will be their second big chance at giving her a big job, and clearly they don't want to. And they know.
You know what I think it is? Yeah. I think it's the television studio that she does all of her interviews from. Have you noticed? She's always in this and it's always like this, like there's Vaseline on the lens or something. Yeah. Everything is very saturated, and her head is right up to the camera.
Yeah.
And if I were an Arizona voter, I'd be saying, what's going on? Do regular Zoom room. Where is your copy of The Power Broker, Carrie Lake? Where's Room Raider? She could be doing the more conventional TV hit, and maybe she'd be competitive against Gallego.
Well, you also think that she would be good at TV. She's a TV
She was a
personality.
TV person. That's the
the
weird
other
part.
thing.
She
No,
was a
she has
morning
communication
talk
skills,
show
but
host.
it's the way that it's set up in all these interviews. It's like she's beaming in from space. It's like the Hale-Bopp cult or something. Like she's coming in giving messages from a different universe. And if she just kind of played the more conventional part, I think she'd be doing better than she is. Meanwhile, Gallego seems to be doing the hard work of trying to position himself, trying to kind of revise his past radicalism. He's making inroads among the Hispanic voters who are pro-Trump at the presidential level, but they're looking at him as, oh, okay, he's from our community and he's not so alienating. Lake has a lot of work to do to catch up, and I think it just starts with a different TV setup.
I think I tried to I took a run at this in an earlier podcast. I'm going to take another run at it because I don't think I quite got it. But there is a difference between the way Trump surrogates and Trump himself are received this season. And I think part of it has to do with someone like Carrie Lake is she's this sort of OG Trump. And I don't think Trump himself is in the position to be the OG Trump. He is not the bullying guy right now because circumstances have humbled him in a way that may be extraordinarily enraging and frustrating to him, but in a way that softened him, believe it or not, I think, to the larger public. He is being done a great favor because he is not put in a position to be able to be a bully right now. And if you are still on the Trump, the MAGA bully model, you are sort of behind the times. And I think that is kind of what's happening. And there's long been this idea about the Trump trial where, well, it's a sort of binary situation. There are Republicans who aren't quite MAGA, and if Trump is convicted, they will be done with him. And if he's not, they'll come home to him. I don't think that's the case. I think the kind of conviction and the kind of court case that leads up to the conviction is going to have a lot more to do with how people respond to him than we had realized at the start of this, especially because it's gone as bad as it's gone in so many respects for the prosecution. And so even if he is convicted at the end of this, I think it is not the binary situation that we sort of looked at it as beforehand.
I mean, I think it's a binary situation in this sense, which is there are going to be two choices. I guess RFK will run and get a larger percentage than any of us would desperately wish that he would get, probably, because the choices are so unpalatable on both sides. But we're being asked to judge Trump in a way, again, that the American people decided pretty much, not the American people, but a plurality or enough of the American people decided they were going to hold their nose. A lot of them love him. Not that many, though, really. I'd say half the Republican base loves him. Republican base is not that large. 20 million people, 30 million people love him. Then other people will vote for him, on sufferance. They'd rather vote for him, all things being equal, than they would vote for Biden. And why is that? This is the problem for Biden, because I don't think it's that people dislike his personality, his raw personality. He doesn't have that much of a raw personality. You have to sort of dig in to understand what his personality is like and how cornered it is. It's not that they don't like him it's that he's senile. And I can't stop saying this because he did it again today. I don't have the right quote in front of me, but he went and he said, everything, I'm really proud of the fact that we passed the Palanakalaka Act. I mean, I don't have the act, but I mean, it was something literally like that. He said the Palanakalaka Act. So Trump's in a courtroom. We're being asked to judge whether or not he paid hush money to a porn star, which I think everybody accepted years ago about him, and has already made up their minds about that case. And then whether it rose to a felony because he was hiding it from the feds, or I mean, God only even knows what it was. He was paying her off in order to win the election in 2016, which is apparently now a felony.
Yeah. Biden said, you may have covered this, but Biden said that Hersch Goldberg Poland was in the Rose Garden at the Jewish American Association event.
Yes.
And had to correct himself.
Not in a nightmarish tunnel in Gaza. But today, my point is that was chilling in a different way. But Biden literally today lost control of his mouth in referring
so the
to
debate's going to go very well.
Yeah. So we're being asked to choose between two different types of problem.
Yes.
And I'm not sure we actually know right now. Yeah.
It's a very tragic election overall because they're both tragic figures in their own way. And I don't mean that trying to, slop pity on them, but Biden ran for president for a very long time and lost and was ridiculed. And anytime he ran, he was ridiculed. He was treated worse really by the people in his own party, he's on almost
20-year cycle.
Yeah.
88, like 2008.
Right. Exactly.
2020.
And each time it was like, and each time he wanted to run for president, his fellow Democrats were like, Joe, we really like you. We love you. I mean, everybody loves Joe, but they were so condescending. And then in 2016, he's the vice president. And does he get the support of the incumbent president who's leaving after 2 terms, having won over 50% in both of his elections? Does he just hand it off to his vice president like normal people do? No. Now, obviously, there was all sorts of stuff with Beau and there were complications and stuff. But Obama had made it clear, look, Hillary's, she's got to be the next one. She's the candidate, whatever. And so he goes his whole career where people just think he's this like ridiculous, clown. And then one day they're like, we need a clown. We need you, Joe. We need the guy who's like, we need the goofy guy who rides the train with nowhere to go and is from Scranton, and knows how to talk to people.
He was the most famous politician in the Democratic Party who wasn't a nutcase. Yeah. That was the story. Everybody else in 2019 was being a nutcase, and he ran as I'm not a nutcase. Right. Now he's the president. He's been the president for 3.5 years. So we kind of know he's not a nutcase.
But that's the thing is they treat him as if now he is. Is that he had this like his whole life he wanted to be president. He finally gets to be president, and it's and he has all this tragedy in his life and all this mourning, and he overcomes it all and becomes president by beating Trump too, who's like the great big enemy of the left, and then he's saving democracy, whatever, and he can't even really be president or be in the moment or enjoy it after climbing to the top of the mountain because he's such a shadow of himself that it's like this lifelong thing. He barely seems to know he's there. But I agree on the central casting thing. The way I think about it is this: when the show Scrubs, when Scrubs was launching, Scrubs was the sitcom based in a hospital, and it was what made Zach Braff sort of super famous for a while. And when they were casting for a guy to play Dr. Cox, who was the experienced doctor who had such a problem with authority that he couldn't rise through the administrative ranks. But he, turned out to be a great teacher and whatever, but it was very sarcastic and funny and all. So when they're casting for it, they put out this notice. They're looking for a John C. McGinley type for the role of Dr. Cox. Right. John C. McGinley's agent says to him, I think you could get this. You're John C.
You're John
McGinley.
C. McGinley.
Why don't you try out for it?
Yeah.
So John C. McGinley shows up and he says, you got him. You wanted John C. McGinley? You got him. And the way he tells the story, he had to audition anyway.
Right.
For John C.
But
McGinley
he
to be
got the
John C.
role,
McGinley.
Right. But he gets the part,
and he
and
got the
Biden gets
role.
right.
This
But-
was the thing, is that there was a very clear, we're looking for a
Yeah.
Joe Biden type, and Joe Biden shows up and they go, well, you're old, you have to try out anyway, and he wins. And there's a certain casting call nature to the environment around certain
But
elections.
there were other
I just think the difference. Can I just say about the two
Yes.
different problems? I think that's a great way to frame the election. I think the difference is what Washington considers Trump problems: the chaos, the drama, the scandals, the everyone kind of walking around on eggshells all the time because you don't know how he's going to pop off. America doesn't care about that. When America thought about the Trump years now, they were just thinking about, well, the economy was really good. We didn't have inflation. Gas was lower.
Yeah.
And Trump, we seemed to have a little bit of swagger. We hadn't been humiliated in Afghanistan. Russia hadn't invaded Ukraine. Israel hadn't been attacked by Hamas. I think it's that simple. And so when you're asked, well, which problems do you want? Most Americans are like, well, I don't pay attention to the news anyway.
Right. Well, this is why Biden has an opening, by the way, and and the Democrats have an opening in my view, which is that there are data that suggests that there was so much a blizzard of noise during the Trump years that people have forgotten some of the details of what it was that Trump did that horrified everybody and had his numbers in the 30s, for much of his presidency. And so they're going to have all this money and they can remind people. I think the Washington of Trump that America has not accepted is the idea that he is a unique fascist threat that is going to destroy the country if he is allowed back in the White House. That argument, I think, has been lost. Oddly enough, it may be the only one that has some kind of serious frame behind it because of January 6th. But of course, they were saying this about Trump from day 2 of his presidency in 2017. And so they're like the boy who cried wolf, or Chicken Little, and now here they are making that argument again. And I actually think that they would be better served reminding people, not talking about the economy so much so that they can be reminded that they liked the economy better when Trump was president, but like, you remember Charlottesville? Do you remember when he drew the hurricane path differently? Do you remember when he attacked that congresswoman for the hat? Do you remember what he said about COVID? Do you remember how he behaved? Do you remember what it was that made you say, I can't take this guy anymore? And they, because of their lawfare strategy, mucked that up. This is, I think, Abe's point. They blew it because now they've made him a sort of pursued man. He's Dr. Richard Kimball being hunted by the one-armed man of George Conway and Rick Wilson with their arms cut off going after him. And that's not what people were having problems with him about.
But I also,
because they were like, he's crazy and he's not running the country very well. And the only way that Biden can beat him is by getting people to understand that the choices between, you think I don't run the country well, remember how you felt about him. I don't know what else he's got. Because here's what he said, by the way, before Abe, I want you to talk. I'm not, but here's what he said. Let me close with this. After I signed Pakalakataka into law, that is the direct quote.
So what does it look like on the official transcript? I want to see how
between that and drawing the hurricane on the map. I think most Americans are like, let Trump draw his hurricane on the map. It doesn't matter. The hurricane's going to
then he's got nothing. Then he's running on fumes. I don't know
what I'm saying.
But I'm totally with Continetti here. I think if you have to remind people what they didn't like about Trump, that means they're already over what they didn't like about Trump. And that is a
Well, they're not
big-
going to like it again. Here's where you and I might disagree. As soon
Go
as
ahead.
Trump is back, it will all start over again. And people immediately will be like, "Oh God, we're back to that." Because it's not like Trump will change. I mean, we've seen this just with his joke the other day about, oh, maybe I'll do again. FDR had 4 terms. Why not me? I mean, he's not going to change, and all the same stuff will happen. But I just don't think it will affect this particular election because the public's judgment of Biden I think so negative.
I think it can. He alone, not Biden, he can breathe new life into what people didn't like about it.
That's right.
Because he can find new iterations of it to actually shock you again. He can do that.
And what they're shocked by, what the Washington, the Gang of 500, whatever you want to call them, what they're shocked by is not what America is shocked by. Trump saying, I'd love to have 4 terms as president. It's like, what? He can't do it. It's unconstitutional. We rewrote the Constitution to make sure. And they're like, he's on to something else already. This is why Carrie Lake and these sort of like pseudo Trump or the mini Trumps don't get it. It's 80% shtick.
Right.
It's a stand-up comedy routine.
Exactly.
And I think you hit on something on an important part of that.
I'm sorry.
I think you hit on an important part of that, which is that the Trump surrogates, the Trump wannabes, they obsess over certain things and they just kind of stick with this character for the whole season or whatever. And Trump, as Abe said, he's already on to something else. Oh, wait a second. He's doing this and now he's doing that. And the news cycle moves so fast because Trump isn't really, he's not going to give a 4-hour speech about the same thing and whatever. You don't always know exactly where he's going to go with it. Maybe you taunt him from the crowd.
He doesn't mean any of it. And they do. And when they do, when you're Carrie Lake and you mean it, or you're JD, and you're Matt Gaetz or you're Marjorie Taylor Greene or you're Lauren Boebert and you mean it, you sound like you need to be put in a mental institution. And though the Lincoln Project thinks that Trump needs to be put in a mental institution, enough of America is like, not to use a totally outdated reference, but he's Shecky Green. What do you mean you're going to put him? Now, by the way,
he's in a Vegas night lounge.
Needed to be in the real Shecky Green needed to be in a mental institution, but nonetheless, it's shtick. They know the difference. He's been the most important public figure in American life for almost a decade, even eclipsing Biden in many ways because of their relentless pursuit of him, and they know it's shtick.
I think it's such a good point. It's such a good point.
Okay.
His most ineffective enemies take him to heart in exactly the way that his most ineffective followers do. I think that is. I think, John, you're absolutely right. They hang on every word as if it's real, and it's not. And his magic, to the extent that he has some sort of political magic, is that it's not. Is that he can swim through it all and get to the next thing, and they can't. Yeah.
His rhetorical shtick. I mean, there's a term for this, sort of in speechwriter, like classical Ciceronian speechwriter or something, is that he says something and then he takes it back in the same sentence. He says, I hate them. They're monsters. They should all be destroyed. Some of them are very nice people.
Absolutely.
They should all be sent into prison, but they love their families, and I love their families too. We all love our families, don't we? Aren't we all in love with our family? Let's hear it for the American family. He doesn't, there's no,
it's called antithesis. I came across this in Judi Dench's Shakespeare book. Shakespeare does it all the time.
Yeah.
It's not Cicero, it's Shakespeare that Trump is.
Sometimes I can't tell that when I'm just reading a quote. I don't know if it was Trump or Shakespeare who said it.
Exactly.
It's true. He's like,
but also, by the way, the other
speech could have been delivered by Trump.
The other thing that people underestimate.
Some of it's sceptered. Maybe some of it's an aisle. I don't know.
A Shakespearean, the tragedy or comedy of Donald Trump. That would be a pretty good Weekly Standard parody.
But the comedy part is actually one of the reasons he's effective, because I think people actually underestimate it. John, you mentioned the marker. He took a marker and he changed the path of a hurricane. on a weather chart. That's crazy, but that's hilarious. Like, some of the stuff that he does is genuinely funny. And I've had people say this to me privately. I've had people who fear him, who do think that, he could, blow a crater into the earth. And they've said to me, the biggest problem we have is that occasionally he's very funny and it's very effective. And no one else is very funny in national politics. But that's the entertainer part. The things he'll do are not, well, I'm glad we passed the pachyderma, blah, 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 blah. Taking out a Sharpie and changing the trajectory of a hurricane is so ridiculous. It's funny. And he has other things like this, too, where occasionally he really makes you laugh. And it's far more effective, I think, than people think to the whole project. The occasional laughs that he gets.
I think people know. I just think that the Washington elite doesn't know. It is so allergic to him in every possible way that despite their efforts, even earnest efforts, to try to take the measure of what is going on here, the only place they can go, which I think is part of Abe's point about the general view of this group of people about what America is like in 2024, is that he is evil and they like the evil. The American people like the evil. He's evil, so therefore they shouldn't like him. But they like him, so they're evil because he's evil, because they like his evil. Now, I'm in a weird position myself because I don't find Trump funny at all. Now, there's a whole category of comic and comedy that I myself have never found funny. I never found Robin Williams funny, for example. And it's kind of the same thing, which is, you don't like that joke? Here's another one 10 seconds later. Oh, I'm going to change my tune. I'm going to this just whatever I can do to get a rise out of you, I'm going to get. I'm allergic to. So
I have to complicate your analysis here.
Okay.
I never found Robin Williams remotely funny.
Yeah.
I find Trump hysterical.
Okay. So I'm just talking about so I labor to, just like they do, to understand what it is that people might like about him. But I think where Biden is in real trouble and where the Democrats are in real trouble and where Matt gets it right is that all in all, he was president for 4 years. And those 4 years, even with COVID being the last of those 4 years, compared to the 3 years of Biden, does not put Biden in a favorable light. And people are being driven crazy by this fact and are going to condemn the American people for having the opinion that America is worse off on November 5th, 2024 than it was on November 2nd. I think it was November 2nd, maybe November 8th of 2020 when the election took place, and they're going to make their decisions based on that. They're not allowed to think that. And one of the things about liberals and the left, we know that, is that they now believe that it is their place to say what it is and what is not allowable to think. And if you don't think the right thing, you'll get canceled. Someone will go after your job. You'll occupy the administration building. You're not allowed to say certain things, and that's how they think of it. And the American people get to go into a voting booth and make their own minds up without them telling them what to do. And so the court case may come down with a Trump conviction. Okay. There is a very significant prospect of there not being a conviction. I don't think an acquittal, but I think could 3 or 4 people in that jury box say, I don't know what he did wrong, really, to be honest. I don't see it. They haven't really explained to me how this is a felony. So I'm a little confused here. Is it illegal to pay off a porn star? No. Did he try to win the election by suppressing news about the porn star? Yes. Is that a crime? How would that be a crime? Like that. Like, I know juries have mystical abilities to come to consensus, but the problem here is that there's nowhere where to go. Every charge is the same charge. That's interesting, right? Because it's not like they've lined it up so that, there are 17 different charges. They drop 16, they can drop 16 of them and convict on the 17th. Every one of the 30 charges against Trump or whatever it is literally the same charge. On this date, he falsified, a record was falsified. And then a month later, a record was falsified. And a month later, a record was falsified. If you find that you don't believe that one of those 31 records was falsified, you kind of have to find that none of them was falsified. Like there's no out for the jury. I don't know where they go. Like they can't, there's no lesser charge unless the judge gives them the ability to convict him of the misdemeanor that didn't rise to, which is a possible jury instruction he could give them next week, apparently. And then he'll be convicted of a misdemeanor. Or 31 misdemeanors involving writing checks. And that really is where we came in with Donald Trump. Like nobody has any doubt that he kites checks and underpays, fires people and doesn't pay them and doesn't pay his lawyers and I don't know whatever else that there might be. Okay. So, and there's of course the fact that Joe Biden passed Pal-Malalang into law. And the two of these guys are going to go face to face, apparently, in 34 days. Just keep that in your head.
It's something to live for. Are you kidding?
It's so something to live for.
It's something
God.
to live for.
That's why I think it's
something to look forward to for months.
I am now completely convinced that something's going to happen to blow this up because we need it, and therefore it's not going to happen. We need it so badly. It's been 18 months of this Narishkeit with Trump versus Biden within 2 points of each other. We can't take it anymore. And speaking of not being able to take it anymore, apparently there's some evidence that after many, many, many months of being horrible jerks because of their own political woes, maybe the Biden administration can't take it anymore trying to play this middle ground game between Israel and Hamas. 3 or 4 different data points in the last 48 hours. One of them discovering apparently that Egypt scuppered the hostage negotiation without the United States really understanding that's what it was doing. It's not quite clear why Egypt did that. That's one thing. So they look naive and foolish. They said, okay, you got to move 1 million Palestinians out of harm's way if you're going to do a major military operation in Rafah. And guess what? They're out of harm's way. I know the New York Times is telling us today that it's very hard. Moving it's very difficult. It's catastrophic. The shift away from Rafah is really catastrophic because, I don't know, they were living in luxury in Rafah and now they have to go back 5 or 10 miles away from Rafah. This is the horror is just beyond all imagining. But America said, you've got to have a plan to get Palestinian civilians out of harm's way if you're going to stage a major intervention in Rafah. And they did it. They've done it. So what's Jake Sullivan supposed to say? Apparently, according to the papers, he's softening on his opposition to the major Israeli moves in Rafah. And maybe the third reason is something that Seth has been absolutely meshuggah about, but in a good way, all day, which is what's going on with the pier. So Seth, give us a little bit on the pier.
When the Biden administration first said they were going to build a pier off Gaza on the shore to facilitate aid from on a sea route from Cyprus, my initial reaction was actually very different from a lot of people's reaction was, well, this is stupid. But my reaction was, well, it doesn't really matter that it's stupid. Whatever, if it gets a bit more aid in, fine. And if it makes the Biden administration feel like they are advancing toward the goal that they themselves have laid out to allow, Israel to finish the job or a Rafah operation, then do it. In other words, if it salves their conscience or whatever, then let them build a pier. But for weeks afterwards, and I just kept saying it in my head, they're building a pier. And every time I said it, it sounded more ridiculous. And that's why I'm not shocked. I'm not surprised, but it still is a bit shocking, the story today, that the pier is a great success in itself. It has been built. It didn't fall into the sea and it didn't float away. And the aid is getting there. But that's as far as the aid is getting. It's getting stolen on the 8-mile drive from the pier in Gaza to Deir al-Bala, which is about, 6 or so miles from where the IDF has stationed its corridor in Gaza. Okay, Deir al-Bala. So that's the town. If people
we should we should make understand this. Boats come up to the pier, and then trucks roll off the boats onto the pier, and then they drive down the pier and they hit the beach. But no American foot is on the sand of the beach or on the territory of Gaza in any way, shape, or form. Americans are not, there are no boots on the ground. So the food is being unloaded off the pier, 300 trucks worth of food a day, apparently, being offloaded or driven off or offloaded from the pier to this place 8 miles away. And in that 8-mile stretch, Hamas is stealing all of the American food. Now,
and in some cases,
who's shocked? Chris Hayes of MSNBC, upon reading Lara Seligman's report that one of the administrators said no American aid has gotten into the hands of
the Pentagon press secretary, the Pentagon press secretary of the Defense Department.
We have no evidence that any aid has gotten into the hands of any civilian in Gaza. And Chris Hayes tweeted, "What? Question mark?"
But but there's part of
what?
this that it's the whole thing is really.
How could this happen?
The whole
this
thing
is
really
Hamas we're talking about. They just love to distribute.
It's a social service organization.
Yes,
because
we were told, Hamas and Hezbollah provide
they
charity.
Run schools and they have television stations and they have. Anyway,
here's the process: the U.S. has to contract in order to not have boots on the ground with the UN. The UN hires people. Okay, so it's not like UNRWA and Blue Helmets go and pick up the food and drive it to the warehouse. The UN has to hire contractors. Now, you remember what happened the last time subcontractors were hired to drive trucks full of food into Gaza. There was what they called the Flower Massacre because 100 people were killed in a riot for the trucks. It was blamed on Israel. Then it was shown to very clearly not be Israel's fault. But who knows who these people are? But we're handing off to the UN, who is subcontracting to, I don't know, some guys to drive the trucks from American aid from the $300 million pier, 8 miles. And none of them have been able to make the journey. It's like the final level on a video game or something. Who can get the truck 8 miles down the road with its contents intact?
Pac-Man.
Yes,
it's the truck.
And what has happened is that the UN tried to explain it today to Reuters. He said, "Well, this is an area where they haven't really seen a lot of trucks." In other words, when you like it's a remote tribe in the Amazon, well, what do you expect these people to do when they see a truck but mount it? They haven't seen trucks, so they mount the truck.
So those are the American trucks. I just want to point out, there's been this whole thing. Gaza, look, one of the indictment points in the ICC indictment of Israel, right, for war crimes of Bibi and Yoav Gallant, is that they are deliberately starving the people of Gaza. Here's how deliberately they're starving them. Today, May 21st, forget the American trucks. Through the Kerem Shalom crossing, 381 trucks worth of aid, through the Erez West crossing, 70 trucks. Okay? That is 450 trucks worth of aid, along with the 300 trucks of American aid that supposedly rolled off the. So that's 750 trucks worth of aid, none of which is going to feed a Gazan. And I'm telling you right now, Jake Sullivan and this is their baby. Like this, somebody had the brilliant idea of and now you're going to screw with our pier? Okay, Israel wasn't letting enough food in, and we gave them crap, and they misbehaved so terrible. But suddenly, I don't know, baby, we can't work with these people.
Well, but the other angle is the Egypt thing you mentioned.
$300 million pier we built, an engineering marvel by the Army Corps of Engineers in the water. It's amazing. And the people aren't getting the food. Go into Rafah. It's almost like they're saying, all right, fine, go into Rafah. You know what? We spend all this time. We yelled at you. We trashed your reputation in the world. We gave the ICC reasons to indict you for war crimes. Now we've had this pier up for 3 days, and they're stealing all the food. Go get them. That's it. You were right without saying you were right all along.
That's also what explains the Egypt.
Okay, what? That's not what they're saying?
No, that's not what they're giving official condolences to Iran on the death of Raisi, and our deputy ambassador to the United Nations was
that was yesterday, Matt. Things change.
I'm behind the times.
I mean, the Pentagon acknowledged that the food
they are
suggesting is being stolen.
They are suggesting that they're open up a thing, but you have to understand the Egypt angle of why this all happened today, because the Egyptians are withholding aid from going through the Rafah crossing. So
and Israel's being blamed
aid
for
that
it.
comes off the pier is not, and it's not a lot of. It's not a lot of food. The aid that comes on days when Egypt is also letting the aid in through Rafah, you can say 1 billion tons of food have come into Gaza today and all share the credit. And what happened was Egypt is withholding on their end. All you see going in then are, 90 trucks of food, 9 of which don't make it to the warehouse or whatever, and it embarrassed the administration. This was a genuinely embarrassing thing because it played up. It made it impossible to ignore the fact that the pier isn't really doing anything because it doesn't have enough food coming in to make up for the crossings. So they were hoping that the crossings would be open and the pier would come in, and Jake Sullivan would get up there and say, guess how much food came in to Gaza today? This much, with his arms spread wide like a kid. This many food came into Gaza today. But guess what? How much food came into Gaza today? Almost nothing, because it was only what the Americans could bring in,
and
the Americans are bringing in nothing.
Well, the Americans aren't bringing nothing. It's all getting stolen.
But even
it's getting stolen when Egypt brings it in. It gets stolen when Israel brings it in.
Can't process nearly as much as the crossings can. It's not equal to the Rafah or the Erez crossing in terms of how
no amount of food would satisfy any of the critics of Israel. It's all a ridiculous kind of rhetorical gambit in order to appease the Hamas sympathizers who are rioting in the streets and on our campuses. And it's all ridiculous. The real danger here is that this pier gets fired on by Hamas, and Biden putting our soldiers once again in a situation where they're completely exposed. And there's no thought of what might occur because it's all based on trying to solve a perceived domestic problem or some bizarre type of appeasement toward the Saudis and the Qataris and the Egyptians by saying, we're going to have to put the pier in so that we can feed the Palestinian people. No army in the history of human conflict has fed the enemy. I never understand that. And yet this is the weird universe that Israel has been put into. Yeah. And it is doing exactly what it's been asked to do and getting no credit for it and won't get any credit for it.
And this is also, I think, more evidence that so much of the policy is being run by people on the far left, foreign policy wise, because there are a great many people, I believe, in the Biden administration who know in their hearts that if you build a pier for billions of dollars and you pop up a pier and put it up overnight in Gaza, that the aid is not going to get to the Gazans, right? But there are idiots there who thought that it would. Because if they didn't, they wouldn't have done this to set themselves up for this embarrassment. So
or they want to feed Hamas.
Right.
That's the scary part, right? That they're happy to have it diverted to Hamas because they want Hamas to live to fight another day. But you're right, and that's why I say I don't think you're right that this has no practical effect. There was some weird, bizarre mood shift this afternoon.
Right.
Now it could end tomorrow. So I don't want to be, I don't want to be naive in the way that Abe says that the far left wingers are naive and assume that somehow Blinken and Sullivan are going to won't wake up tomorrow morning and start criticizing Israel again. But we are now having the experience of providing direct aid to Gaza that is being stolen. And Israel has had the experience of providing direct aid to Gaza that not only gets stolen, but in which there are stampedes in which dozens of people are killed, and then they get blamed for it because the people who are driving the trucks are not Israelis, and they're getting set upon, and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm scared," and they drive off and they roll the trucks over people who are desperately trying to get flour and all of that. But something's got to give. Israel, they said, move 1 million people. Israel's moved 1 million people. They said, open the Kerem Shalom crossing. They opened the Kerem Shalom crossing. They say kill fewer people. Israel, as we've heard now repeatedly from John Spencer and Andrew Roberts and others, has a ratio of civilian to combatant death that has never been seen before in human history in urban warfare terms. That may change if stuff starts really happening in Rafah. So what do they say tomorrow? Oh, one last thing. Biden today, it's very big of him, while he was deciding to praise himself for the Balak, did say that Israel is not committing a genocide in Gaza.
It's great.
Thank you so much, President Biden, for your leadership and your wisdom. I mean, if you thought that Israel's committing a genocide in Gaza, wouldn't you be changing your policy there a little bit? I mean, this is
why he said that? Because there's a lawsuit. He's been sued 3 months ago already. He was sued for aiding and abetting genocide. The ICC request for arrest warrants is a wake-up call for somebody who is already being sued for genocide. He's got people who, that Josh Paul character, people who used to work in his administration, step down and join these lawsuits against him for genocide. He has to say this. I don't know how if he even, not that it's much of a limb to go out on. I don't know that he even does that without the ICC. Jake Sullivan said today,
right?
Well, they're going to indict Netanyahu. What are they going to do next? Indict Americans? I mean, he literally said that to the press.
Yeah.
What comes? And so Jake Sullivan said it stops here. It stops here. Where does it stop? Here in America.
Yeah.
Oh, they might come for
here,
us.
But I mean, that's my point,
here.
Which is suddenly it's as though, there's a fecklessness to their policy behavior, it's not just malign there, because some of it wasn't malign at all. Some of it was good. It's feckless and weird and inconsistent and bizarre. And then it took this very negative turn as the Rafah invasion was approaching. And now there's been all this distractions with the ICC and the pier and the food and the this and that and Iran and the firing from Iran. And what's left for them to say Israel shouldn't finish the job? I mean, there's an odd part about this, which is that they have no argument left except Israel should let Hamas survive. And they said today Hamas cannot survive. Hamas cannot be a part of any post-war solution to what happens after the war is over in Gaza. So that's implicitly committing themselves to Hamas's destruction. So
Do it.
All right, let's see it happen.
Like there's a debate in an episode of The West Wing where the main character and the Republican are.
I don't want
debate.
Seth,
his answer to everything is, I would cut taxes, and they sort of make fun of him. My answer to everything in this situation is defeat Hamas. It answers literally every question. You want to move toward a possible two-state solution? Defeat Hamas. You want to feed Gazans again? Defeat Hamas. You want people to go back to resettle internally to where they lived before? Defeat Hamas. You want to weaken Iran? Defeat Hamas. You want to deal with the Saudis? Defeat Hamas. Literally, my answer to everything the administration says it wants can only be accomplished if you defeat Hamas.
By the way, well spoken. I have one criticism of you, which is that you're only citing NBC shows, and I think you need to broaden your scope here, because
don't you have a guest to producer credit on The West Wing somewhere?
I had one season. I was a consultant to The West Wing for one season, and trust me when I say that they didn't listen to me. So I contributed very little to the bizarre alternate fantasy world that was The West Wing, but I was privileged to collect a significant amount of money for doing nothing, and I thank John Wells and the team at The West Wing 20 years ago for helping to support me in the year that my first child was born. That was very kind of them, and I'm very grateful to them, but I'm just saying, you don't have to just cite NBC in the future. You know what? We've gone on too long. I think we'll drop the recommends today because it's late and we're all tired. And I sound crazy. So for Seth, Matt, and Abe, I'm John Podhoretz. Oh, Matt just said, yeah, you sound crazy.
You do.
Okay, so I sound crazy. Yesterday, I told people not to vote for me for president, Matt. You weren't here, but I did make that point very clear.
How did you know my plans?
Now I think maybe I should run for president because
you're just as crazy as the other ones.
Senile person and the stand-up comedian lunatic, like, I don't know, my kind of crazy. I don't know, could be, but no, I'm not running.
Moderate that debate.
Oh man, that would be interesting. Okay, for Abe and Matt and Seth, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.